Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Bishop Bible Podcast. This episode is a continuation of the previous episode where we discussed Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. We're going to move on to Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. This is what it says. And you're going to see that as we go back and forth between some of these Gospels, there's a little bit of an overlap because it talks in verse 24 about verse 24 and verse 25 about Jesus being born. But we're going to circle back and talk about how Jesus was born now. So in chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, it says, "And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn." And here's another hand of God's providence. Jesus had to be born in Bethlehem in order to be the Messiah, because that's what was prophesied about him. Mm-hmm. And Joseph, obviously not wanting to move his pregnant wife, was going to stay in Galilee and in Nazareth so that she could give birth to her child around her family, around her friends, her favorite midwife, all of these things that were set up. But because God moved the heart of Caesar Augustus to call the entire world to be registered, they had to go to the place of Joseph's origin and his family's origin, which was Bethlehem. So guess what? Mary is legally bound to him. So she has to be registered underneath his name. She doesn't have a choice either. And so they have to go. And they go. And I'm sure that would have been a terrible thing because she was probably like 8 months pregnant.
So pregnant.
When they had to leave.
I always wonder what their attitude and outlook was like during this time period. If they were like, oh, this is fine. Like, I don't know. They seem like godly people, right? So maybe they didn't
And
complain.
godly people never complain.
Never complain.
I mean, we're not supposed to complain.
But it's just so interesting to think about like how frustrating that would be to them. Because they're like, really, honestly, now we have to go to this place. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know if it just never crossed their minds that those prophecies needed to be fulfilled, or like, I don't know, or if they knew about it and so that gave them peace. But I just feel like just shows very frustrating things can still be what the Lord wants and what's going to like work out best, even though you're like, oh, this is the worst.
It's true. Being interrupted is something that Christians should expect, because the amount of times that God interrupts our plans and our day in order to accomplish something that he wants to accomplish through us is an astronomical number. God's priorities are not our priorities. Mm-hmm. He's looking at things from an eternal perspective, and we so often look at things from a routine-oriented perspective, where we're like, I have to get up and brush my teeth, and then I have this doctor's appointment, and after the doctor's appointment, I have to go to work, and then I'm going to work, and I'm going to do these things. And he's like, well, guess what? I'm going to change your plans because you're going to have to stop and help somebody who has a flat tire on your way to work. And they're going to need more than just help with a flat tire. They're going to have relationship problems that you're going to get to talk to them about. So this is how God works. He interrupts our day with things that are more important than what we thought was important.
That is a hard thing to remember a lot.
because sometimes those things are really big deals. Like, hey, I'm going to have a baby and I'm supposed to be having this baby here.
And I know no one.
And the whole situation changes. And that is why one of my mentors, he has this saying that I think is just super awesome. He says, "Blessed are the flexible, for they are not easily broken." And that is a key to life, and especially missions trips and anything else that you're doing. If you are super rigid, you are going to be broken. But if you're flexible, you're going to be able to be happy in the situation, even if it feels like a bummer.
Yes.
So they have their life turned around, and they have to go somewhere that they were not planning on going, in a really bad time for them. And yet, God is fulfilling his word, and he's keeping his promises. And he's not just doing it because he's mean, he's doing it because it's necessary. And I think that's something that we often forget when we're inconvenienced, is that God doesn't just inconvenience us because he is that annoying sibling that just wants to poke fun at us and see us squirm. He is inconveniencing us because it is necessary. It is necessary for our good, or it's necessary for the good of the people around us.
Yes. That is true.
Verse 8 says, "Now there were in the same country shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger.' And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men.' So it was, when the angels had gone away from them into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, 'Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us.' And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. Now, when they had seen him, they made widely known the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all those who heard it marveled at those things which were told to them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen as it was told them." We are so desensitized to God taking on human flesh and descending into time to save us. Mm-hmm. It is not something that we are enamored with anymore. It's not something that causes us awe and wonder anymore. We're like, oh, Christmas season is here. Let me get presents for people. But we are not blown out of our minds by the fact that God himself, who created the entire universe, stepped down into human flesh so that he could live among us, save us with his own death, and redeem us to himself by his blood. But when it happened, when he was born, heaven was so overwhelmed that it could not contain itself, and a host of angels manifested, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, goodwill towards men." Because this is the ultimate sign of goodwill. It doesn't get any better than this. That somebody who is so far above you would step down into your situation, take on the misery and the pain that you are feeling, so that he can lift you up and bring you into a better place. What more can you do? It'd be easy to just throw money at people. It is hard to step down into somebody's life that is broken and miserable and hurting and live with them to lift them up. That is goodwill. That is the grace of God. That is the majesty of God. That is the glory of God. That is the tender care of God, that he would step into our brokenness instead of just putting us aside and taking on our misery. And it boggles the mind, like how God actually can do this and why God would do it in the depths that he would go. It says that he humbled himself. God humbled himself. The Almighty humbled himself so that he could die for us. We just don't think about it. It's so... We're so desensitized to it that we don't think about the majesty of it. Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot else to say about that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an important point to make that we can't just muster ourselves into awe of God. Like, part of it is reorienting our minds and being like, thinking about Christmas as not just the Christmas that we were raised in, but like what that celebration is of. And there are things that are like practices that can really help you kind of reorient your mind. But I mean, mostly it has to be asking the Lord to continually renew your understanding of what it meant for him to come to earth. Mm-hmm. Because that's such an important part of it, is like, you can't just be like, I'm going to be more in awe of God today. Like, that doesn't lead to an actual, like, true awe. I think it leads to piety, probably.
Yeah.
Like, it leads to probably a lot of other things. And, like, good practices can get you there, too. But, like,
Yeah.
we really do have to ask God to reveal that depth to us.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that does take intentionality. Mm-hmm. And if we're never intentional, we're never going to get there. One of the things that I think about when I think about awe and wonder is the Grand Canyon. I've heard about the Grand Canyon my whole life. I've looked at a lot of pictures of the Grand Canyon. And when someone tells you about the Grand Canyon, they're like, there's this giant canyon in the ground in the southwest United States. And you're like,
nice.
Cool. And I feel like a lot of people have that attitude about God and about the redemption that Jesus Christ has brought for us. They're like, 2,000 years ago, someone died on a cross and they rose again. Yay. So what? But then when you look at a picture of the Grand Canyon and you're like, okay, like that does seem pretty cool. And when you have a real encounter with God, or you are having one of your first conversations with somebody about God where things start to actually click and make sense, you're like, okay, I see this. I understand this. But it wasn't until I stood at the Grand Canyon and looked out over it and actually saw how immense it was that it filled me with awe and wonder. Mm-hmm. It was a surreal experience that overwhelmed me in a way that only a couple of other things actually have. Mm-hmm. Because it is just immense. The scale of it, the grandeur of it. And I got to be there right at sunset, so it was beautiful. There was just wonderful colors in the sky, and the whole thing was amazing. And when you encounter God, there are those times where you really encounter him in a way that you are beginning to see God unveiled. and you are left in awe and wonder because you actually encounter something that is real and something that demands awe. And you cannot manufacture that, but you can ask that God would give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of Him, that the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, you may know what is the hope of His calling, what are the riches of the glory of His inheritance in the saints, and what is the exceeding greatness of His power towards us who believe. You can ask for those things. And God says that if we seek Him diligently, we will find Him. God is not trying to withhold Himself from us, but God does want us to be intentional about our pursuit of Him. So, be encouraged by that. If you haven't had a deep encounter with God, start seeking, start asking, start knocking, and be patient. Wait on God. I think about the story of Elisha right now. So Elijah was a prophet.
I've never mixed those up.
Never. So Elijah was a prophet, and he was a prophet to the northern tribes of Israel, which had fallen into some really bad idolatry. The king and queen were super corrupt, and they were killing all of the people of God. And he felt like he was the only one that was left in Israel. He does this great thing where God works really mightily through him. But then the queen is like, well, I'm going to kill you for that. And so Elijah chickens out and he runs away. And he is like, well, God, just kill me. God's like, not yet. So anyway, God meets Elijah on a mountain. And Elijah is in a cave. And first there's, I think it's lightning that passes by, but God wasn't in that. And there was a firestorm that passes by, and God wasn't in that. And then there's a still small voice. And God meets Elijah in the still small voice. Wait on God. Don't try to manufacture this encounter with God. Don't try to hype yourself up to the point that you meet with God. Wait on God. Be patient, but seek Him. Go to the cave. Be there and wait on God. Because what I don't want is for you to be so desirous of this experience with God that you end up creating a false God in your mind. I've seen it happen to a lot of people that emotional experiences become their relationship with God instead of actually knowing and encountering the true God. They run out during the thunderstorm. They run out during the fire. And guess what? Both of those things will hurt you. But when you wait on the Lord and He meets you in the way that He needs to meet you, you're able to hear what you need to hear. You're able to love the way that you need to love and be loved the way that you need to be loved.
Yeah, I feel like it's really important not to put too much emphasis on any of the specific things that we do to try to chase God. Like, not to be afraid of like experiential things where we feel like the Lord really met us with with a situation, and not to be afraid of silence and not to be afraid of solitude and the disciplines that lead to deeper understandings. I feel like we get so stuck in like, I'm either a disciplined person or I'm an experienced person, and it's really like important to have the openness to the Lord to, I guess, meet you in different arenas of your life. It's kind of like, in marriage, you have a lot of days. There's just a lot of days where you are living life and you're like, I did grocery shopping today, and that's great. And like, not every day is like the day you got married where you're like, this is so great. And not every day is like all of those great emotional things. There are those moments. moments or marriages made up of all emotional experiences are very turbulent.
They are very turbulent.
But lacking them entirely makes them very dry. So it's just a balance.
Yep. You still got to pay bills.
So many bills.
But if you stop pursuing each other, then your marriage is going to be a roommate's situation, not really a thriving, growing marriage.
Yeah. And there are disciplines involved in our relationship with the Lord too, where it's going to be based on a foundation that is solid. And then the Lord will meet us in the way that He created us to be met. Like through these emotional experiences. And that aren't going to happen every day. They're going to be like things that speak to our specific situation. So I just think that it's important not to chase the safety of only discipline or the experience of only things that are flashy and exciting.
Yeah. And there's sometimes too that it's important to be spontaneous in relationships, and I think that's true with our relationships with the Lord. Like, if you have never done a 24-hour prayer meeting, then guess what? It's probably a good time to like do something that challenges your comfort zones in your relationship with the Lord. Something that is a little bit of a sacrifice maybe to you to be up from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. praying and worshiping. So just throwing that out there, that you don't want to be in a rut with your relationship with God, where every single day, year after year, is the exact same routine, because you are going to end up rotting if you fall into that kind of a relationship with Him. Be spontaneous. Do different things. Go on a hike. Go fishing. Change it up. It's good.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us.